Greetings. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. You're listening to the Human Butterfly Effect podcast with RDW. I am yours truly, RDW. What up, though? Thank you all for joining me today. I am super excited to have you all here. How is your week going? Are you having a good week? Maybe you're hanging on by a thread. In any event, you're in the right place. I'm going to encourage you and energize you today. That's the goal of this podcast. In fact, if you haven't checked us out already, I need you to check us out online. rdwcreations.com. Check us out. We've got a lot of neat stuff on our website for you. We've got a blog, some videos. Check us out. We're also all over social media. We're on Facebook. We're on the gram. We're on LinkedIn. Just started a Substack page. It's on and popping. If you're a writer or reader, get on Substack. A lot of good content on that platform. I invite you to follow us at RDW Creations. Google it and look for the butterfly. All right, y'all ready to get into today's topic? By the way, shout out to my Philadelphia Eagles. Fly like an eagle. Our Super Bowl champs out there. How y'all feel about the Super Bowl? Are you an Eagles fan? No, our Detroit Lions didn't make it. I think, the Lions, we've come a long way, but I think they barely got to, what did they say that, what was that expression? My dad used to say to me, your eyes is bigger than your belly. In other words, it's pulling the cart before the horse. They was talking about Super Bowl at the beginning of the season, and that's an admirable goal, but we fell a little short, but we coming back. The Lions, they're not done by any stretch of the imagination, but nevertheless, we do have a new Super Bowl champion, our Philadelphia Eagles. My pastor said pigeons don't, or let me say, he said eagles don't fool with pigeons. I just threw that in there for whatever reason. He said eagles don't fool with pigeons. I don't know if that means something to any of you listeners out there. I hope you get the gist of that. Nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and move into today's topic, and this is a heavy topic. We're going to talk about that Detroit mother who lost her 2 babies while she was sleeping in her van, homeless. And I want to start out by reading portions of an article I found on Detroit Free Press. I'm looking at their online site, freep.com. And this article is entitled, Detroit Mom Calls City for Help Before 2 Kids Froze in Casino Parking Garage. It was written by Andrea May and Nusrat Rahman. And the article begins, a Detroit mother reached out to the city's homeless response team at least 3 times, the most recent in November, nearly 3 months before 2 of her children appeared to have frozen to death on Monday while they slept in a downtown casino parking structure. In the course of that conversation, there was no resolution reached on where they would go, Mayor Mike Duggan said. During that call, the mother told a staffer with the homeless response team that she was staying with family but wouldn't be able to stay there much longer. Just a few miles from this casino where the mother was parked, family beds were available at a shelter, Duggan said. The family did not call the city's homeless response team back, and the city never followed up, he said. For whatever reason, this wasn't deemed an emergency, Duggan said. I'm going to stop reading the article there. But I do encourage my listeners to go out and read it in its entirety for yourself. Now, I want to enlighten you on several things, but let's start out with this. It is not the media's job to educate you about the issues that are ongoing in and around your community. Let me say it another way. It is not the media's job to give you the play by play. In other words, all the pertinent details about whatever issue that is ongoing in and around your community. That is a responsibility, my friends, that falls upon each and every one of us. It is your responsibility to do your due diligence to learn about what's going on in your community. Do not wait until it's something that affects you. That's not how you should be seeking or retaining information. You don't wait until it's imperative for you to learn before you start learning. You have to become involved early on in the process so that you have some level of understanding. And that's what my attempt is today, to give you some understanding about homelessness and housing crises in this city and abroad. Now, if you haven't already, I do invite you to go and listen to earlier podcasts that were posted. We did an interview about affordable housing lessons with special guest Will Lawrence. He is an organizer with The Rent is Too Damn High in Lansing, Michigan. And he and I sat down and had a very in-depth conversation about affordable housing, legislation, and homelessness. And so this podcast is sort of a bridge. It's kind of, I hope, to bridge the gaps, because even though we talked about a number of things, there was a lot of details that we left out. And so, in lieu of this tragedy, I thought this might be a good time to sort of address those issues. Now, I just mentioned that it's not the media's job to educate you. Another thing I want to enlighten you on is that very often, when you are seeking information or retaining information, it's a good idea to pay attention to what is not being said. Let me repeat. Sometimes you have to focus on the parts that's being left out. There's an idiom that says the devil is in the details. I don't know why they say the devil. Maybe because they're trying to discourage people from actually paying attention. But I would rephrase it to say the truth is in the detail. We get so caught up in the salaciousness, the talking points, the headlines, and too many of us make a determining factor or an opinion based on, some type of microwave information. And what by that, I mean something quick that you got in, the time it takes to pop a bag of popcorn. But that's not how you learn or retain information. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper and you have to pay attention not only to what's being said, but what isn't being said. And so, on that note, I want to ask my listeners a question. I'll turn the timer on here. Read to you about half of the article from the Detroit Free Press. Did you notice what was not said? Did you catch on to what I left out? Now, this isn't a trick question. I know I didn't read the full article, so it's not something that I purposely left out because I'm trying to gotcha. Nope, that's not what we do here. I want you to think about what was not said in that article. Any ideas? What was omitted? What was missing? Any ideas? The article spent a lot of time talking about what this mother did and did not do. If you read the article in its entirety, it even went on to talk about, it started out she didn't call, she should have called, all of that craziness. And then it went on to talk about she called before last year or 6 months ago, whatever the case is. But what is missing? Any ideas? I'll tell you what was missing: an expression of condolence, words of compassion, genuine care or concern. I didn't read any of that to you, and it's nowhere in this article. When they came out with the newscast, I don't know if you guys saw, a lot of people got on the news, had something to say. Even the baby daddy got on the news talking about she should have called him, or she did call, but she didn't specify she was homeless and yada, yada, yada. They spent a lot of time demonizing this young lady and assigning blame. But as the mayor said, for whatever reason, this wasn't deemed an emergency. He's exactly right. If he's right about one thing, it's that it wasn't an emergency. And that's why you have a mother who now has to bury two young children. That's why you got two kids that have died right now because, as he said, this is a quote, for whatever reason, this wasn't deemed an emergency. It's not. Detroit, along with so many other cities and states across our great nation, do not recognize homelessness or the housing crises for what it is. They're very disingenuous with their statements, and they tend to blame those who are facing these circumstances rather than shed a light on the issue. You need to understand that there are laws, policies, procedures, and systematic issues in play that perpetuate homelessness and the housing crises. Now, you might be wondering, how do I know? How do I know what I'm talking about? Well, I'm going to tell you, for starters, I've walked in those shoes. Started advocating in about 2025 when it happened to me. DPD officers, along with my landlord, showed up at my house, knocked on the door, said, "Give us the keys and get out." And within hours, I was homeless, and I was homeless for the rest of the year following that, almost a year before I found a place to go. I did write a book on my experience with homelessness, and it is entitled "You Don't Know the Half of It," a story about homelessness, healing, and hope. It is available on our website, rdwcreations.com, if you're interested. Not going to spend any time on this podcast talking about my specific story. However, I brought that up because I need you guys to understand. I know what I'm talking about. See, unlike some of you, I don't have to rely or be bamboozled by the headlines, because not only have I walked in those shoes, I've advocated for myself and others who have walked in those shoes. I've talked to the mayor, the chief of police, other leaders in this city and state. I've testified before our state judiciary committee in support of several housing legislations. I've protested. I've been at community meetings at a grassroots level with tenants and other organizers. I know what I'm talking about. 10 years. I know what I'm talking about. And what I can tell you was that there was a lot of meat being left out in the substance of this issue. There was a lot of blame being placed on this mother, which is ridiculous. First of all, let me educate you on what the homeless response team is. It's called CAM. CAM is an acronym for Coordinated Assessment Module. That's what CAM starts or stands for, excuse me. And essentially, it is a homeless hotline. If you find yourself in a housing crisis, you dial this number, they do an intake, and what they're supposed to do is find you shelter. But it don't work that way. First of all, you have to be completely destitute when you call the number. If you notice in the article, it said that the mother called, but at the time that she called, she said she was staying with a relative and would need a place to go. Well, according to CAM standards, If you're in that circumstance, let's just pretend you are homeless and your homegirl or your homeboy lets you stay the night at their house. That's not homeless according to Cam because you got somewhere to go and they're going to tell you to call back tomorrow. And even if you are completely destitute, you're standing out in the middle of the road, you have no place to go, you have no resources, you have no support, they're still going to tell you that there isn't an available bed and to call back tomorrow. And so what you have to do is call Cam over and over and over and over and over and over for day after day after day, for week after week after week after week. They never call you back. Rarely do they call you back. You have to keep calling them. And eventually, after weeks of calling, they may find you a bed at an emergency shelter. Which brings me to this point. I don't know whose bright idea it was to come up with a hotline for homelessness. And then they're only open Monday through Friday. You can't call them on no Saturday or Sunday. Because they don't place people in shelters over the weekend, usually speaking. Whose bright idea was it to even come up with this foolishness? It shows that they have zero understanding of the issues or the challenges that people in these circumstances face. This woman, and I don't know her at all, but I can assure you she was in between a rock and a hard place. Don't nobody want to live in their car, especially in the dead of winter, especially when you have children. Nobody wants to do that. Anyone that's living in their car is doing so out of a place of desperation. Let's start there. And so if you're in between a rock and a hard place, or let me put it this way, have you ever had or not had a pot to piss in, but not a window to throw it out? How about no pot, no piss, no window? Have you ever been in a circumstance like that? If you have, then you should understand that something as simple as making a phone call is difficult. How can you call somebody day after day, night after night, and you ain't got a roof over your head? Now, before you say, well, they give free phones out. Okay, I need you to think it through. Where you going to plug the phone if you're sleeping in your car? Because they don't give car chargers for free with that. And if you're sleeping in your car, it should be understandable that you're broke. You don't have money. And even if you have money, whatever little money you have, you spending to put gas in the car, because you can't just pull up somewhere and park and just, stay posted. That's not how it works. We'll get to there in a second, but I want to focus on this hotline. The mayor was insinuating that the lady didn't call, or she called too much, or she didn't call enough. It doesn't matter if she called every day, all day, none of the days. They wasn't going to help her. We see that in the results. Because if they was going to help her, how dare you say that there were beds available? If there were beds available, why wasn't she in one? My guess is when she called Cam, they gave her the runaround like they do 90% of the people that call there. It's ridiculous. Why don't we have street teams that go out and try to find these homeless people and offer the necessary services? I'll tell you why. In addition to, there probably isn't enough people to do that. They probably don't want to be bothered. Half of these people don't really want to be bothered with the homeless in the first place. For anybody to come up with a hotline as a suggestion to deal with this issue shows that they don't have zero understanding of the challenges someone faces when they don't have a place to go. I saw the baby daddy on the news. He was talking about the mother too. Ain't nobody extended no condolence to this lady. Now, I did read the other day, I'm not going to read the article, but I did read the other day that she found an organization to help her for the next year. And that's good. I'm glad somebody stepped up. But it's sad that she had to lose 2 children first. And the only reason, let me be clear. The only reason why the mayor is talking about reviewing the homeless response team and how they do things, the only reason why they stepped up to help her is because this is a black eye on the city of Detroit, as it should be. The mayor has been in charge of this city for years. For you not to know how the system works, first and foremost, is problematic. I understand he's the mayor and he probably entrusts someone else to handle this, but you should still be aware of how things go, particularly in your city that you oversee. Let's start there. Second of all, where do you think these nonprofits and shelters get the funding to operate? Yes, we have individuals and organizations that donate. Yes, they do. People give money, yes, they do. But where do you think they get the bulk of their funding to even operate? They are nonprofit organizations, which means that they operate off of grant funding. When the grant funding comes in from the federal government or some other entity, usually it's dispersed or administered through the city, depending on the type of grant. In other words, the mayor is in charge. Let's just put it that way. So it's offensive to me that now you want to review a system that you oversee and you should have had, or you should have been aware as to the goings on, because this is not new. I understand this is a new issue. That's what I talked about, the sensationalism. That's what I meant about not trusting the media, because some of y'all saw this story and were horrified, like, oh my God, that's terrible. And you think this is an isolated incident. You think this is the exception, but I'm here to tell you it's the norm. And the mayor and his constituents are very aware of that. They didn't put that in the article either. Also, let's go over a few rules. As I mentioned, there are laws, policies, procedures, systems in place that perpetuate these issues. I just gave you an example of CAM and how they do things. That's not an effective way to address and or help homeless people, because homeless people have a lack of resources. Else they likely wouldn't be homeless. 40 out of 50 states criminalize homeless. Yes, I said 40 out of 50 states, they criminalize homeless. What that means is that essentially, if you're caught sleeping in your car or sleeping on the side of the road or on a park bench, it's a crime. How do you make being homeless a crime if you don't have anywhere to go? I understand that a lot of us don't care about the homeless, but they don't just disappear because you don't care about them. They don't just disappear because the shelter line says we can't help you. They don't just evaporate. In fact, they seep out into our communities. That's why you see them in front of the grocery stores, in front of the liquor store, at the gas station, when you come up off the freeway. Many of them, do not have a place to go. One of the reasons is the ineffectiveness of CAM. Also, preemption is a big issue in most of our states. There's no rent control, which means these property owners and developers can charge whatever they want. Why is that effective? Because to qualify for a house, in terms of renting, you have to make 3 times the amount of rent per month. Have you looked at the rent prices? They too damn high. So that's not easy. It's not easy to meet them circumstances. And if you have bad credit or a prior eviction, that makes it even harder. But this is why we say housing is a human right, because without food, shelter, or water, one will cease to exist, as we see, unfortunately, with this mother and her 2 children. When you're out in the elements, you become a victim to your circumstances. Do you know what happens to homeless people? They are attacked, raped, robbed, physical violence. We haven't even touched on the mental strain and stress, anxious, depressed, hopelessness. Well, you ain't homeless. What that got to do with you? Because as I said, they don't evaporate or disappear because we lack the capacity to care for them or understand their issues. That's why you see them out in the community. Stop letting the media tell you that all these people are good for nothing, lazy people. That's not the case. There are laws, systems in place, policies that make it difficult for them to get on their feet. For an example, I just told you most states criminalize homeless. So let's just pretend you get homeless, you ain't had nowhere to go, so you sleep in your car. Let's just say it's you. You ain't got no kids. Let's say it's you. So you gonna do what you gotta do. You gonna sleep in your car. Okay, if you're sleeping in your car and you know it's illegal, you can't just pull up in a parking spot and stay posted. You have to drive around. You have to be strategic. You have to wait until it's dark or till you can be conspicuous and park your car somewhere. And then even when you park your car, you can't just like you curl up in your bed and go to sleep. You sleep with one eye open because you don't want to be robbed or become a victim in some other capacity. So you're not really sleeping well, even if you're sleeping in your car. But let's just pretend it's just you. You ain't got no kids. You're sleeping in your car. Okay. All right. You sleeping in your car. You working. You saving money. Okay. Let's say it takes months. You put up some money, and by happenstance, they find out you sleep in your car. The cops roll up on you one night while you asleep, and now you got a charge because it's a misdemeanor. In some states, it's a felony. Okay, you go to court. They don't give a goo. I almost cuss. You got to whatever the penalty is, a fine or whatever. Okay, but now let's say 6 months later, you're on your feet. You save some money. You found a landlord or a property owner, and you apply for a place. Do you know one of the things they run in addition to an income verification, in addition to a credit check? Do you know what they run? A background check. And when they run a background check, it just pop up felony or misdemeanor. It's kind of like the eviction laws. Do you understand everybody don't get evicted for back rent? Some people get evicted, whether they're taking you to court to terminate your lease, maybe there's an issue with repairs or some other dispute. In any event, it shows up on your record. When you apply for housing, bam, there go your name. It don't say, well, my landlord was illegally renting to me and we had this dispute and we had to go to court. Don't say the details. So if you caught sleeping in your car in one of these states where it's illegal and you catch a charge, and like I say, 6 months later in this example, you go apply for a new place, you saved up money, go apply for a new place, and they run a background check and this felony appear. They don't know you got a felony because you was homeless. All they say is deny. You didn't pass the background check. Or you go apply for a job. This is what I mean. Just a few minor examples. There's so many others that I could give you. But it's just a minor example of how the laws, the policies and procedures, they perpetuate these circumstances. So therefore, it's unfair that we demonize people that need our help, but we glorify the system. We look at people that's in these circumstances and we talk about them and we put them down and we find fault. But when it's time to look at the system, we turn the other way. We don't want to be bothered until an emergency such as this comes up. And it should be noted here that the mayor, I believe, is in his last term as mayor, and he's anticipating a run for governor. So please understand that him speaking out, that's why there was no mention of condolence or no empathy or no compassion, because that's not the purpose of them speaking out. They're speaking out because this draw attention, the wrong attention. You can't have that type of headline when you're running for office. You don't want the people to think you don't care. I mean, that's awful that a mother lost her kids because she had no place to go. I don't care what she did. I don't care if she had bad credit. I don't care if she was working at KFC and didn't have enough money. I don't care if she was previously evicted. I don't care if she called the housing hotline for the last 10 years. It doesn't matter to me. She still did not deserve to lose her children. Don't nobody deserve to die because they can't pay a bill. What's wrong with us that we have this mindset? Because that's what you're saying when you say you don't care about the homeless. It's a death sentence. These shelters are not safe. The streets are not safe. And while I'll admit that we do need more shelters, we do need more people that's going to help and contribute. But what we need more importantly is for people that care. A lot of the people that work at these shelters, work these homeless hotlines, I understand it's a job to them. They there to check the box and move on. They don't care about these people. The gentleman by the name of Sherman Butler in this city, they murdered him during an eviction. And if you listen to the details from the body cam footage, the bailiff and the cop, they walked in, they showed up with that mindset because it's so little regard demonstrated, so little respect demonstrated to people who are poor, impoverished, or stuck in a bad situation. All they see is the headlines. That's why I started out saying you can't just pay attention to the headlines. That's not the full story. All they see is evicted. All they see is felon. All they see is the addict on the corner or the homeless person begging in front of the store. That's all they see. But what happened to lead to them set of circumstances? What's going on that this person's life can't be redeemed? We don't ask those questions. We just automatically assign blame. And some of these people, they do deserve blame. They messed up. They did the wrong thing. They mismanaged their money. They got in, bad relationships. They did the wrong thing. Nobody is trying to say that everyone who's homeless or doesn't have a place to stay is an angel, including myself. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying to you is that who cares? You cannot live, thrive, or sustain without a roof over your head. This is why when we protest and advocate, you will hear a lot of housing advocates or homeless advocates often say housing is a human right. Because if you are a live being, you need shelter over your head. And I can't emphasize enough how some of these policies, procedures, and laws perpetuate. What they do is lie and tell you that it's a supply and demand issue, that there's not enough houses. That's not true. It's not enough affordable housing. There's not enough housing that have guidelines that are conducive to the people that who live and or work in those areas. I met a developer who bought a house for the low in the city. I think he paid $2,000 or $3,000 for the house. Spit shined it. Now you've written it out for $3,000 a month. But okay, according to the laws, you have to make 3 times as much. So if the rent is $3,000 a month, that means you got to be bringing home $9,000 a month. Multiply that times 12. That's over $100,000. But you bought this house in a crappy neighborhood of the city. So therefore, who are you renting this property to? We talked about the Illages in our last affordable housing podcast. The Illages, they just got a $300+ million tax break for their entity. They were supposed to build 20% affordable housing. Affordable housing is defined as housing that takes 30% or less of a person's income for rent. And we have 50% of Americans, not just Detroiters, Americans who's paying well above that for rent because the rent is too damn high. So when they come into our neighborhoods, the developers, they buy properties in bulk from the land bank for the low. They get tax incentives, all other kind of tax breaks. So does these shelters. When they get this funding, this grant funding, they get all type of incentives. In other words, they have help, they have resources. But the people who really need it, what do we have? Where do we go? I bet you can't go buy no house right now for no $2,000. Maybe, I'm sure some of you can, but a lot of us can't. But we turn a blind eye to those things. How is it that you're able to rent housing in this city? 90% of property owners are non-compliant. Understand, that's not just a piece of paper. That means that property isn't up to code. We ain't talking about blinds or paint. We talking about houses that don't have working heat or water or broken windows or other, broken pipes or vermin or holes in the wall. We talking about houses that have issues. Ride your neighborhood. How many vacant homes do you see on your street or in your neighborhood? Yet they'll tell you we don't have enough houses. No, it's not that we don't have enough houses. And don't misunderstand me. We do need more houses that are built. We do need more property owners. But what we need more importantly is a change in the legislation so that people can meet the criteria. Ain't nobody going downtown. Ain't the average Detroiter is not going downtown to purchase one of them $300,000 condos because we can't afford it. The average Detroiter is not paying $3,000 a month for rent because we don't make that kind of money. So there's a number of things that needs to be changed as it relates to affordable housing and homelessness. And if you don't understand why I keep talking about the two in the same sentence, you don't understand the issue because they do intertwine. We're going to revisit these issues later on. And I hope that you have learned something. Let me give you 3 quick tips that you could do to get involved right now in your community as it relates to housing and homelessness. Number 1, you can organize. You can get with other tenants, other lake folks, and start an organization similar to how you start a block club. Start a tenant organization. Start keeping track of some of these property owners. Right now, we have a system that keeps track of renters. We don't have any system that keeps a track of these property owners, so we don't know the bad ones from the good ones. Tenant organization could help with that. Another thing that you all could do is volunteer. Get your kids, get your homegirls, get your homeboys. Go and volunteer at a soup kitchen. Take an hour of your time. And when you get there, don't just look at the people like a deer stuck in headlight. Open your mouth and speak to them. Say hello. Ask them how they're doing. You'll learn something. And the third and final thing that you can do right now is become involved by educating yourself on the issues. We are only as empowered as we are informed. Don't wait until you're homeless. Don't wait until your friend homeless. Go out there and educate yourself on the issue. Homelessness is a lot more than what we think it is. You'll be surprised. Some of us have coworkers, friends, family that's homeless, and we don't even recognize it because they got a job, but we don't know they sleep in their car or they drive to a hotel when they clock out from work. Do you know why that is? Because of the policy procedures put in place. They don't qualify for housing for whatever reason. It's too expensive or their credit not good or they got put out somewhere before. And so we have to change legislation. But we can't impart on our leaders to do that if we're not knowledgeable of how things go. So with that being said, I want to thank y'all for joining me on the Human Butterfly Effect podcast. See you next time. Bye for now.